I remember very clearly the general election of 1979. The Labour government of James Callaghan had collapsed on the back of the winter of discontent, and Margaret Thatcher's Conservative Party was in the ascendancy, ably supported by a right-wing tabloid press who ran daily front-page supportive headlines in the weeks running up to the May election. I was too young to vote back then, but having been brought up in the contradiction, which was a Tory supporting working class family, I had already drunk all the Kool-Aid and officially joined the Young Conservatives. When Thatcher swept to victory, we cheered loudly and patted each other on the back for the small part we played in that victory by leaflet dropping the streets of Bradford. We were young, gullible and incapable of independent thought. Looking back now, I can see how my naivety managed to rumble on through the tenures of both Margaret Thatcher and latterly John Major, until I reached a point of political ambivalence by the time a Labour government was returned to power in 1997, with a sweeping majority under the leadership of Tony Blair. At this point in time, the pursuit of my police career had become all-consuming, and I had largely decoupled from political interests and engagement. I attribute the continuation of my demographically absurd support for Conservative politics back then to a combination of police culture and latent nationalistic pride on the back of the Falklands War of 1982. I joined the country's fourth biggest police force in 1983, at a time when the police had recently received a substantial pay rise, courtesy of the great handbag herself. I went to training school with military veterans who had served in the Falklands just a year before. Loyalty to the Thatcher government by police officers was a given, and anybody believed to be dissenting from that line would have been labelled delusional and quickly ostracised. By the time I had completed my first year of service in 1984, the infamous miners' dispute had begun, pitting the National Union of Mine Workers, under the leadership of Arthur Scargill, into headlong conflict with the Thatcher government. During that year-long series of often violent confrontations between police and striking miners, the sight of battered and bruised police officers further entrenched the Tory supporting credentials of Maggie's Army in Blue, and I was no exception. I conveniently dismissed the sights of equally battered and bruised miners, and was still so mentally immature that the plight of these people and their communities was lost to my reason. I could see now that we were just used to persecute these proud working people who were fighting for their very existence, their way of life, just as we all would in the same situation. But I was so confident in the righteousness of my political position that when the miners finally succumbed in 1985, I saw it not as a victory for us to be celebrated, but simply as a natural and just outcome, unremarkable in nature and unworthy of further reflection. Later in life, that position would change dramatically as my young, closed mind began to open up with the onset of maturity, and a newfound ability to think for myself began to assert itself. Today, I can only think of a small pocket of positive attributes when it comes to Margaret Thatcher. Strength, certitude, consistency, loyalty and determination, all laudable qualities in any leader. Sadly, I can now see that sitting alongside them were callousness, prejudice, intolerance, intransigence, thoughtlessness, arrogance and stupidity. These qualities, in combination, led to a toxic attack on the state, perpetrated by zealots and ideologues blind to future consequences in their lust for personal gain. And from all of this emerged two great evils, two crimes against the people which would go on to underpin all that would befall this now hapless, rudderless, moribund land. Evil number one, selling off the state. Most of our current malaise has its roots in the ideologically fueled policy decisions which led to a dismantling of the state and the manufacturing base of the United Kingdom in the 1980s. State assets were sold off debt-free and at discounted rates to a private sector who fell over themselves to acquire what would for them become lucrative monopolies. Monopolies free of any and all competition, with statutory regulators easily held in check by the prospect of well-paid jobs in the industries they were set up to regulate. The fat cats couldn't believe their luck, and they lapped up the lifeblood of our country and then proceeded to destroy all that had been gifted to them. What we see today in our broken water, energy and transport industries are the skeletal remains of once thriving, socially focused state operations. Evil number two, the deregulation of financial services. Concomitant with selling off all of our critical infrastructure, the Thatcher government also systematically dismantled the checks and balances which had previously held at bay the instinctive recklessness and dangerous greed of the City of London. As a consequence, irresponsible financial speculation was allowed to run riot both here and in Reagan's America. This ultimately led to the global financial crash of 2008, when an accumulation of over 20 years of utter folly in the markets burst open like a festering cyst and made its putrid mark on history. Our history. But if I lay the genesis of this catastrophe at the hands of Thatcher and her acolytes, I lay its continuation firmly at the hands of the Blair government of 97 to 2007, who did nothing to constrain or reverse these damaging measures. They did not take back the state assets stolen from us. They did not roll back on financial deregulation. They did not overhaul regulatory bodies. Indeed, through the corrupt practices of PFI, when building of our national infrastructure was handed over to a bunch of cowboys whom we are still paying back vast amounts to, an already worsening situation was worsened further. They did not act because by then they too had been swallowed up into the corporate world of greed, and government and big conglomerates had already become two cheeks of the same arse, with Blair the whole nestling between them. So I think that what reawakened my interest, but also gave birth to my newfound cynicism in these matters, was the dawning realisation that nothing changes except the label. We are a democracy in name only because, regardless of the political stripe of the government of the day, it is the billionaire classes which rule over our misfortunes. It's a sad truth that in this country We can change governments, but we can't change policies. The political landscape is neither red nor blue, it is continually purple. Purple is the status quo. Purple is selectively enriching. Purple is what they want to keep. Purple is the colour of deceit. It's time for a change of colour. Sadly, at present, the swatch book needs more options in it before I can be tempted. But that might be changing before our very eyes. Dare to dream, lest this nightmare continues.